You've been killing them your whole life without knowing it. Every time you lift a garden pot and see that gray cluster of tiny armored creatures scrambling in every direction, every time you sweep them off a patio or let a child squish one just to watch it roll into a ball, you have been slowly, consistently, methodically destroying one of the most important biological systems operating underneath your feet right now. And the worst part is that nobody ever told you what they actually are. Because if you knew, if you genuinely understood what a roly-poly actually does, you would build them a habitat before you'd ever consider harming one. This is the story of the most underestimated creature in your garden. What it really is, how old it is, what it's doing to your soil while you sleep, and the one fact buried near the end of this video that will completely change how you see the ground you walk on every single day. Let's start with something that immediately sounds wrong but is completely true. The roly-poly is not an insect, it's not a worm, it's not a spider or any kind of arachnid. The creature you've been casually flicking off your patio furniture is a crustacean, the same biological class as crabs, lobsters, and shrimp. The roly-poly, scientifically known as Armadillidium vulgare, is more closely related to the creature on your dinner plate at a seafood restaurant than it is to any beetle or ant you've ever seen. It breathes through structures that are functionally modified gills, which is why it needs moisture to survive. It carries its young in a fluid-filled brood pouch on its body, exactly like marine crustaceans do. It is, in the most literal biological sense, a land-dwelling crustacean that made the transition from ocean to soil somewhere around 300 million years ago and never looked back. 300 million years. Let that number actually land for a second. The roly-poly's lineage was already established and thriving before the first dinosaurs existed, before the first flowering plant bloomed, before the Atlantic Ocean existed in any recognizable form. These creatures have survived every mass extinction event in the last 300 million years, including the one that wiped out the dinosaurs, and they did it hiding in the soil, doing the same job they're doing right now under your garden pots, rolling into a ball when threatened, processing dead organic matter, moving metal contamination through their own bodies. Wait, that last one. We'll get there. Because that part of this story is where everything changes. But first, I need to make sure you understand what's actually happening in the top layer of your garden soil. Because most people have no idea, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The soil in a healthy garden is not just dirt. It is a living ecosystem of almost incomprehensible complexity, containing more individual organisms per teaspoon than there are human beings on Earth. Bacteria, fungi, nematodes, mites, springtails, earthworms, and dozens of other organisms are all operating simultaneously, breaking down organic matter, cycling nutrients, building the chemical compounds that plants need to grow. And the roly-poly sits at a critical junction in that entire system. Its primary job is decomposition. It eats dead plant matter, decaying leaves, rotting wood, decomposing organic material that would otherwise accumulate on the soil surface and lock up nutrients in a form plants can't access. It chews this material into smaller fragments, passes it through its digestive system, and deposits it back into the soil in a form that fungi and bacteria can then break down further into the minerals and compounds that plant roots actually absorb. Without this initial fragmentation step, the whole nutrient cycling process slows down dramatically. The roly-poly is not eating your plants, it is processing the dead material that your plants cannot use into the mineral-rich form that your plants desperately need. It is performing, for free, the first stage of a composting process that gardeners spend significant money trying to replicate artificially. And here's where I need you to stay with this, because what comes next is the part that took me completely by surprise when I researched it. Roly-polies accumulate heavy metals in their bodies. Specifically, they absorb copper, zinc, lead, cadmium, and arsenic from contaminated soil, concentrate these metals in specialized cells inside their bodies, and crystallize them into a harmless form that prevents the metals from re-entering the soil ecosystem. They are, in the most literal sense, biological heavy metal filters. They take toxic substances out of your soil and lock them inside their own bodies, removing them from the food chain, preventing them from being absorbed by plants, preventing them from accumulating in the organisms higher up the food web. This is not a metaphor or an approximation. This is a documented, studied, scientifically confirmed biological process. Researchers studying contaminated urban soils have found roly-poly populations with internal metal concentrations dramatically higher than the surrounding soil, demonstrating active bioaccumulation of toxins that would otherwise cycle through the ecosystem. In some contaminated sites, they function as one of the primary mechanisms preventing heavy metal contamination from spreading upward through the food chain into birds, mammals, and eventually into humans who consume food grown in urban gardens. The creature you've been sweeping off your patio is detoxifying your soil right now, for free. With no instruction from you. Now I want to take you somewhere that most videos about roly-polies never go, because there's a layer to this story that goes far beyond garden chemistry, and it fundamentally reframes what these creatures actually represent in the history of life on Earth. The transition from ocean to land is one of the most significant events in evolutionary history. It happened multiple times, independently, in different lineages, and each time it required solving an enormous set of biological problems simultaneously. How do you breathe air when your entire respiratory system evolved for water? How do you prevent your body from drying out? How do you reproduce without the surrounding water that marine reproduction depends on? Different lineages solve these problems in completely different ways, over millions of years of gradual adaptation. The roly-polies' ancestors solved them in a way that was, from a biological engineering standpoint, genuinely remarkable. They kept the gill structures but modified them to extract oxygen from air as long as they stay moist, which is why roly-polies are always found in damp environments and will die in extended dry conditions. They developed a segmented, articulated armor, the same exoskeleton you see today, that limits moisture loss while remaining flexible enough to allow movement. And they developed the ability to curl into a perfect sphere as a defensive mechanism, an elegant solution to the problem of having no burrow or shell to retreat into when threatened. That rolling behavior, the thing that makes children pick them up and that makes adults call them roly-polies or pill bugs, is not a quirk or a curiosity. It is a 300-million-year-old survival technology, refined through more extinction events than we can fully document, still working exactly as designed in your garden right now. Here's a question I want you to sit with for a moment. If something has survived unchanged for 300 million years, what does that tell you about how good it is at its job? Evolution eliminates designs that don't work with brutal efficiency. Every generation that doesn't reproduce successfully takes its design out of the future. For a lineage to persist for 300 million years means that every single generation, through ice ages and asteroid impacts and continental drift and mass extinctions that reset the complexity of life on Earth multiple times, this creature's design was good enough to survive and reproduce. The roly-poly is not a primitive leftover. It is a 300-million-year-old solution to a set of biological problems that it has been solving consistently, without interruption, for longer than mammals have existed. You are looking at one of evolution's most successful long-term experiments every time you lift a garden pot. But here's where I want to give you the part of this story that I think matters most practically, because understanding what roly-polies are is only useful if it changes what you actually do in your garden. The presence of roly-polies in healthy numbers is a direct indicator of soil health. Not a coincidence, not an accident, a measurable, reliable biological signal. Healthy soil with good organic matter content, appropriate moisture, and functional decomposer communities supports roly-poly populations. Degraded soil, soil that's been overtreated with pesticides, soil that's compacted or nutrient depleted or chemically disrupted, does not. When gardeners trying to improve their soil begin composting, reduce chemical inputs, and add organic mulch, roly-poly populations reliably increase. And as they increase, soil quality continues to improve because the roly-polies themselves are driving part of that improvement. This is what ecologists call a feedback loop, and in this case, it's a positive one. Better soil conditions support more roly-polies, which process more organic matter, which improves soil conditions further, which supports even more roly-polies. The creature is not just a beneficiary of good soil, it is an active participant in creating and maintaining it. When you kill roly-polies, you are not just removing individual organisms, you are disrupting the decomposition cycle, slowing nutrient release for your plants, potentially allowing heavy metal contamination to cycle more freely through your soil ecosystem, and sending a population of one of evolution's most durable designs into unnecessary extinction at the scale of your garden. And there's one final thing I want to tell you, because it connects everything in this video to something larger than your garden, something that matters at a scale most people never think about. Soil is disappearing, not slowly, not in a way that allows comfortable complacency. Researchers estimate that the Earth is losing roughly 24 billion tons of fertile topsoil every single year to erosion, degradation, and poor agricultural practices. The thin layer of biologically active soil that supports almost all terrestrial food production on the planet took thousands of years to develop and is being removed at a rate that makes its regeneration essentially impossible on human timescales. The organisms responsible for building and maintaining that soil layer, the decomposers, the nutrient cyclers, the heavy metal processors, the roly-polies and their ecosystem partners, are the biological infrastructure that makes terrestrial life possible. Protecting them isn't sentimentality. It isn't an overreaction to a small gray bug rolling into a ball under a garden pot. It's participation in the maintenance of the system that your food and your air and your water all ultimately depend on. So the next time you lift a pot and find them clustered there in the damp, all 30 of them scattering in that slightly frantic way, take 1 second before you react. Remember what they are: a crustacean older than the dinosaurs, a biological heavy metal filter, a soil engineer running a nutrient recycling process your plants depend on, a 300-million-year-old survival design still working perfectly in your garden today. Leave them there. They were working before you lifted the pot. They will keep working after you put it back down. And your soil, your plants, and the entire invisible ecosystem operating beneath your feet will be measurably better for it.